What is the fastest and the best overall LMDh car for 23 Season 4? That is exactly what we are going to be uncovering in this video. Hello everyone, my name is Marcus. I have almost 9,000 iRacing, and over the last couple of days, I've gone over multiple tests to try and figure out what the best and the fastest overall LMDh car is for 23 Season 4. I've not only gone through the pace tests of these cars, I've also gone through other tests like fuel and tire wear and top speed, so let's just get straight into it. For the first test of the video, I've decided to test our straight line speed down the historic back straight at Le Mans. We're going to be putting the cars on a low downforce setup and throwing them down the straight at Le Mans without the chicanes to figure out what's the fastest car in a straight line. And coming in 4th place, we have the BMW. Reaching a top speed of 326.3 kilometers an hour, this car is not slow in a straight line, but it is the slowest of the LMDh cars. We also saw this last season as the BMW wasn't the greatest at straight line speed tracks like Le Mans, and it seems that it's carried over to this season as well. Coming in 3rd place, just 0.2 kilometers an hour faster, is the Acura, reaching a top speed of 326.5 kilometers an hour. So these two cars are very similar on straight line speed, which means that in a straight line, whether you're racing the BMW or the Acura, you shouldn't have a problem passing each other due to the slipstream. Now, as for 2nd place, this was a bit surprising to me. We have the Cadillac coming in at a top speed of 327.9 kilometers an hour. So about 1.5 kilometers an hour faster than the BMW and the Acura. This was clearly visible last season on tracks like Le Mans. It was clearly better than the BMW last season because of the straight line speed that it had, and that also seems to have carried on to this season. But one thing that is surprising me is that we have the Porsche coming in as the fastest LMDh in a straight line with a top speed of 328.7 kilometers an hour. The Porsche is almost 2.5 kilometers an hour faster in a straight line than the BMW, which will make a difference at tracks like Le Mans where there's a lot of long straights. Tracks like Daytona, it will make a difference as well. But as we'll see later on, the fact that it has a lot of straight line speed doesn't necessarily mean that it has great pace. After I was done with the straight line speed testing, I wanted to test out tires and fuel as well. And for this test, we're going to be using Indy Road, as this track has a lot of slow speed corners and you really have to sort of manage the tires quite well. But first of all, we're going to be taking a quick look at the fuel numbers. Now, they're all very similar here, but there is a little bit of a difference. The worst car on fuel is the Cadillac, using an average of 2.19 per lap over a 10-lap run. This means that this car is using a little bit more fuel than the other cars, and you can even hear that. Like, this sound of the Cadillac just proves, it sounds like it's using more fuel. Coming in 3rd place on fuel is BMW with 2.16 liters per lap. So this is actually quite a bit less. It could make a difference over an endurance race that is using a little bit less fuel, but it's not that much. In 2nd place, we have the Porsche with 2.15 liters per lap, which is a little bit less. And in 1st place, we have the Acura with 2.14 liters per lap. So you can see they are all very similar on fuel. This won't make the biggest difference on what car you should choose or what car you should not choose. It's just a little detail that I wanted to get in there. Now, as for the tires, the way I did this was, of course, at Indy Road. I did a 10-lap run to test out the fuel and test out the tire wear. Now, I decided not to try and push them, as I feel like that would give more inconsistent results, but just kind of stroll around the track and try and make sure we would get an equal tire wear on all cars. Coming in at last place for the tire wear test is the Acura. As you can see out here on the side, I have the average of the 4 tires percentage, and at the bottom we have the average of all tires combined after a 10-lap run. The sensitivity on the Acura and the good turning that it has really makes it use a lot of the front tires very quickly. This could very well put you at a disadvantage in longer races like the IMSA races. Later on in the stint, if you're not changing the tires, you might feel that the car will start turning in less. Now, this is actually a pretty serious problem because the rest of the 3 cars are all very close on their tire wear average, but the Acura is just far down at the bottom. In 3rd place for the tire wear test, we have the BMW coming in at an 87.3 average tire wear, which is about 1.2% higher on a 10-lap run. Now, if you've looked into the setups, you will notice that the 2 worst cars in the tire wear are the 2 cars without the brake migration. Brake migration is basically something that migrates the brake bias backwards or forwards throughout the braking zone, which means that you can sort of save the tires more if you have have brake migration activated and using it correctly. But despite the BMW not having the brake migration, it's only 0.2% lower than both the Cadillac and the Porsche. Yes, that is right, I got the exact same average tire wear on the Cadillac and the Porsche throughout a 10-lap run, and it's not that much higher than the BMW. Now, one thing that is interesting about the Cadillac and the Porsche is that even though they have the same tire wear average, they're actually using the tires in different ways. If you take a look at the Cadillac, it has really good tire wear on the front and a bit less good on the rear, and that's because if you have driven the Cadillac before, you can feel that it's a little bit twitchy on the exit of corners, and you kind of need to use the throttle to rotate the car, and this means that it uses the rears quite a bit more. Now, if we take a look at the Porsche compared to that, it's using a lot more front tires, and that is because the Porsche is a bit harder to get turned into a corner. You need to trail brake it more into the corner to sort of get the rotation out of it, and that uses the front tires more. As for the rear tires, the Porsche is really good here. If you've driven it, you know that it is very stable on exit. It doesn't have those snatches on the exit of corners, and that means that it's not using a lot of the rear tires. Both the Cadillac and the Porsche get 4 points for this test. Now, when we're talking about points, let's see the point standings after these first two tests. As of now, the Porsche takes the lead with 11 points out of 12 possible. After that, we have the Cadillac on 8, the Acura on 7 points, and the BMW rounding out the standings with a mere 5 points. However, we are only halfway through the tests. We have not even done the pace tests yet, and this is where things are about to change. Next up, I decided to take the cars around Le Mans, both on the fixed setup and on an open setup that I made. Now, before we get into it, I want to mention that all the setups that I made and used for this video, like the Indy tire test, the Le Mans setups, and the Road Atlanta setups, are all available for YouTube channel members. On top of that, as a channel member, you get exclusive content, and if you want all of that, I would really love you to join the channel as a member. Now, let's move on with the test. As good as it was in the straight line speed test and the tire and fuel test, the Porsche comes in as the slowest car around Le Mans. The Porsche is really fast on the straights, but its cornering abilities makes it slower than all of the other cars combined. And that's because as much as Le Mans is a straight line speed test in itself, there is a lot of corners where the car needs to be really nimble and really good at cornering. And it's in these places that the Porsche loses all its time compared to its competitors. Coming in third place, we have the Acura. Now, this car is faster than the Porsche with both the open setup and the fixed setup. Despite its lack of straight line speed, the Acura managed to gain quite a bit of time back, especially in the final sector. The Acura is a really difficult driving experience, especially at Le Mans. On a low wing angle, it's hard to get to rotate well, both in slow speed and in high speed at the same time, and this was my biggest challenge trying to get this lap time. At the end of the day, the Acura ends up getting 2 points for its open setup lap time and 3 points for its fixed setup lap time, gaining it an overall 5 points in this test. Moving up to second place, we have the BMW. Now, if you have a look at the lap times, you will notice that the open setup lap time is faster than the Acura, while the fixed setup lap time is actually slower. And that's because the BMW really likes some rotation in the Porsche curves on the fixed setup. It understeers so much on the fixed setup, and it's really hard to get to turn in, and that's where it loses its time on the fixed setup. I believe that if the BMW rotated more on the fixed setup, it could have a better time than the Acura, but it just can't drive in the Porsche curves. Now, the BMW manages to get 3 points for its open setup lap time and 2 points for its fixed setup lap time, gaining a total of 5 points, just like the Acura. And coming in the fastest car at Le Mans, just like it was last season, is the Cadillac. This was not even by a little bit, this was by a huge lot, coming in with a 319.172 on the open setup and a 320.2 on the fixed setup. Now, what makes the Cadillac so good at Le Mans? Let's just say it like this: the Cadillac doesn't really have any disadvantages that makes it bad. It has really good straight line speed. First of all, it's really nimble in slow speed corners, and it's also pretty good in high speed corners as well. The Cadillac is still the go-to car at Le Mans, and with this test, it takes home the maximum amount of points possible, putting at the top over the Porsche with 16 points. For the final test of the day, we're going to be taking the cars to Road Atlanta, as Petit Le Mans is right around the corner. On top of that, Road Atlanta has a lot of bumps, and it has has a good mix of high speed and low speed corners, meaning that if you want to have a fast car at Road Atlanta, it needs to be good in pretty much all places it can. Now for this test we are going to be rewarding double points since the Petit Le Mans event is just around the corner and it is important to be fast at Road Atlanta. Now don't forget that the setups that I used for this test are available to YouTube channel members. Now let's get into the test. Coming in last place, just like Le Mans, we have the Porsche with a 105.658. Now the balance of the Porsche around Road Atlanta felt really nice, but where it was losing most of its time was over the bumps and curbs. Despite it not being on pace, I really enjoyed driving the Porsche as it has a really stable but also really satisfying driving experience at the same time. Coming in third place we have the Acura with a 105.562, a mere 1/10 faster than the Porsche. Now what we need to remember here is that it is a very short track, so 1/10 could be a bigger gap at other tracks, but it isn't actually that bad. Now as we move on to talk about the Acura has a really good ability to jump over curbs, but once again it was for me the difficult balance between trying to find high speed rotation and low speed rotation at the same time that was sort of difficult. However, at the end I think I managed to do it pretty well and get to a decent lap time of a 105.562. This means that the Acura racks up 4 points in the Road Atlanta test, placing it above the Porsche in the final standings. Moving on to the second place car Road Atlanta, we have the Cadillac with a 105.495, a mere 0.5 faster than the Acura. At this point we are talking about the margins, but the Cadillac is a little bit faster than the Acura. Now where the Cadillac gains its time is mainly in the slow speed corners, as it has really good rotation and stability at the same time, making it really easy to send the Cadillac into the slow speed corners. It racks up 6 points in the Road Atlanta test, putting it firmly at the top, but we'll have a look at that in a second. The fastest car Road Atlanta, which even came as a surprise for me, is the BMW. I managed to get it down to a 105.487, a mere 0.008 faster than the Cadillac. However, this still means that it is faster and we have to honor that. Now where the BMW gains its lifetime is mainly the high speed corners like turn 1. The BMW has always been a little bit better than the Cadillac in high speed corners, and at tracks like Road Atlanta it does show pretty well. Now this lap time means that the BMW gains a total of 8 points in the final Road Atlanta test. And as we take a look at the final point standings, that puts it in P2 just below the Cadillac. Alright ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something from it. Now remember, if you want to get your hands on these setups, you can join the channel as a member or join my newsletter, which there's a link in the description to, and you'll get the Acura and the Porsche setup for Indianapolis for free. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to subscribe. I've been Marcus and I'll see you in the next one.